Hi, it's Cam from the Nerd Book Review, where I strive to broaden your fantasy horizons. Today's book is Legacy the Brightwash by Krystle Matar. It is quite the chonker of a book, coming in at 662 pages long. It is the first book in the Tainted Dominion series. I would describe the book as an epic fantasy, masquerading as a dark urban fantasy murder mystery with a little bit of romance thrown in. I know that's quite the mouthful. But as I describe this book a little bit, I think you'll see why I'm going to describe it the way I'm going to describe it. First, real quick, let's read the book blurb, and then we'll get into the book itself. Toshway's faith in the law is beginning to crack. 3 years ago, he stood by when the authority condemned Jason to the brutality of the rift for non-compliance. When Toshway's son refused to register as tainted, the laws had to be upheld. He'd never doubted his job as a regulation officer before. But 3 years of watching your son wither away can break down even the strongest convictions. Then a dead girl washed up on the bank of the Brightwash, tattooed and mutilated. Where had she come from? Who would tattoo a child? Was it the same person who killed her? And why was he the only one who cared? Will Toshway be able to stand against everything he thought he believed in to get the answers he's looking for? I am going to try to do a little bit different format than I've been doing with these first few. I feel like the videos are getting a little bit long, and I've just been using my previous podcast format. If you happen to watch this episode and you've watched previous episodes, if you would be so kind as to leave a comment, whether you like this format better or the old format better, I would absolutely love and appreciate it. Once again, if you like the video, hit like and subscribe, and we'll continue growing this. I am trying to just start to feel my way around as I switch from an audio-only format. That's obviously a lot different when you have to worry about where your hands are, where your face is, and all that kind of stuff. And I want these videos to be, entertaining and informative at the same time. So getting back to the book, the world, what we're dealing with here is basically like late 1800s technology if we're using our world as the basis. There are trains. As with many urban fantasies, we're going to be dealing with one city. Yelsmer is the city. It has a river that runs through it called the Brightwash, which gives us the name of the book. And the city is really broken down really nicely throughout the course of this book. I really feel like Matar does such a great job of just building a vibrant world that really feels alive and feels lived in. But we're going to have even a tram system that runs through the city. It'll be powered by magic, by the tainted, if you will. The magic users in this world are going to be, depending on who is talking about them, will either be called the talented or the tainted. Obviously, you can see how some people view them versus others. So the city itself, basically like it's the industrial heartland of a continent-spanning empire called the Dominion. It's ruled by a queen. Like I said, we're going to have a lot of all the same technology. If you think of like late 1800s in, I always end up thinking like England when I think of like industrial cities, like Liverpool or something like that. Even though I'm an American, I don't know why I don't have those same views of like say Boston or something like that. That was an industrial city in America. I don't know why I always think of them either colonial or today. But think you're going to have lots of income inequality. You're going to have the poor living in tenements and, kind of like squalor, while the rich live in estates up on the highlands. And so it's basically a Gilded Age world. The magic users are going to be treated very poorly. What we have, our main character, Toshway, as I'll talk about him a little bit more. He is a member of what is called the Authority, the Tainted Registration Authority. Everyone who can use magic, which is a really high percentage of the population, actually. It's like close to 10%. They actually mentioned that statistic somewhere in there. Those 10%, they all have to register. Their movements are searched. Who they're allowed to talk to is even policed. They're going to be put into specific jobs by the authority. Those jobs are going to range all the way from people who have a very minor talent to like being able to light the street lamps, up to the most powerful can be healers. It's hard to be a healer. You have to be able to like figure out how to separate like the wounds and things like that. We're not talking quite like say Wheel of Time level of like healing when you do that. Like if someone's going to die, you can't fix that. What you can do is begin to like knit the organs together and things like that. If um, if they're hurt, you can speed healing along. It doesn't seem to like make you perfect necessarily already. You still need a little bit of recovery afterwards. But the magic system's done really cool in this. It's not really like super set defined until much later in the book. So I'm not going to go too far into the magic system. Just know that like the ability, the talent level that you have, you're born with for the most part. But like those who have more talent are able to do more things. And the way that the Dominion puts them into is they'll put you into one job. The magic system, it doesn't seem like it super tires someone out using the magic. A lot of the effects are more like psychological, but if you use too much of the magic, or you do one repetitive task too many times, it can eventually cause what's called the wrath, which causes you to go crazy. Very early on, one of the people who, not Toshway himself, but his partner, her name is Kizrani. She's been with him for forever. She they're trying to find one of her tainted who now has the wrath, and he ends up blowing himself up next to like a load of thermite, which is using explosives, causes just massive devastation when he blows himself up. So consequences, for using magic can be extreme in those cases. So that describes the world a little bit and the magic system a little bit. This book has quite a few point of view characters, but there's two that are like definitely like 1A and 1B. Toshway is, I thought of him as like Clint Eastwood from the spaghetti westerns. He's 42 when the story starts. He is a big man. He's definitely got a lot of people who are loyal to him. He was a cavalry commander in the Dominion Army when he was younger. I think he said he enlisted when he was 13. Then when he got out, he didn't quite know what he was going to do, so he joined up with the Tainted Registration Authority, and he's been there now for 20 years. So he's a man that has always thought that like the authority was good. The authority was helping people, both the mundane people who couldn't use magic, as well as the tainted themselves. He kind of bought the line that the tainted weren't able to rule their own affairs, and they needed to have the Dominion, tell them what to do and things like that. And then he had a son who is very, very powerful with a talent, and he's now been in like what's the magical prison called the Rift for the last few years. People who are in the Rift are not treated well. You can't use your magic in the Rift. Other people who can use their magic actually are able to suppress the tainted with the inside, the tainted or the talented, whatever you want to use in the Rift. If you're not part of the gang or you don't have like benefactors with the prison wardens and whatnot, then life doesn't tend to go very well in there. The authority does not treat even the talented who are outside of the Rift all that well at times. So you can imagine what it's like in it. So once the story starts, basically the main plot line is going to be that Toshway starts to really question whether the authority is for the best or not. Our second point of view character is Stella. Stella is, I imagined her as Nicole Kidman with red hair, which I think is her natural hair color, actually. So she is a talented, tainted. I'm going to call him talented from here on out, but the talented, she, in her registration papers, is supposed to just be a minor talent, but she's clearly far more powerful than that. We find that out like from the very beginning, that she's hiding and that she's been on the run. She has a daughter who she's very protective of and who will feature, pretty prominently within her storyline. Also, Toshway's eventually. He's actually her registered officer, so he is supposed to be, monitoring her and what she's doing. He has a pretty good relationship with her daughter too, and the romantic part of the story that I mentioned is going to be between the two of them. So Stella and Toshway are our two main characters, and then there's going to be a bunch of smaller point of view characters some of whom will only even have like one chapter. Most of them will have a few. Jason, Toshway's son's going to have a couple of point of view chapters from the inside the Rift. We're going to have Leia Winter. She's like one of the richest women in the Dominion. She's going to interact with Toshway at times as well. And the other point of view characters are more served to like widen the story. They're going to like show us more about like the city, the politics, and of the Dominion and things like that. But the big two are absolutely Toshway and Stella. The plot, real quick, just a quick description of the plot, and then we're going to get into the good and the bad and my own opinions of it, the story. So, as the book blurb says, the book starts off. Toshway is going to be. He happens upon a scene of a girl who is dead. She's washed up on the shores of the Brightwash in the slums of the city. Her arms have been cut off. Her legs have been cut off. She's kind of in pretty poor condition even before she died, and she has a tattoo on the back of her neck. That's where the cover of the book is as well. You're going to see pretty quickly that like the other officers who are actually the patrolmen, they don't really care about her. They weren't even planning on doing an investigation because, she's clearly was poor and wasn't probably an important member of society. So they're not going to care what happens to her. But Toshway just can't help himself. He is a good man, at least in his mind, And so he is going to try to figure out what happened to her. And basically that's going to be the underpinning of the entire story is, him kind of seeing that dark world that they live in and the world of inequality that runs on the backs of the talented and that doesn't really care what happens to them. We're not dealing with a world that is inherently in any kind of danger. So while I would, classify this as like more of like a grimdark, just pure dark, I guess, tale, the world itself is doing just fine, right? We're dealing with, like late 1800s. The Dominion's not in any danger of falling anytime soon. It's expanding, if anything. It's got its good growth. They're trying to build a railroad into the city that we're in. But all of the good things that they're able to do are powered by the talented. And you're going to see as the story goes on that a lot of dark things are done in order to make sure that more and more powerful talented are born and that they are controlled and harnessed, basically for their energy and their ability to help the Dominion. Their well-being, you're going to see, it doesn't matter at all. We're also going to see through like Ilya Winter, that the one I mentioned that is, among the richest people in the entire Dominion, that like they're going to live opulent lives while the common person is packed into slums, like 1 or 2 room slums. So, just think of like the Gilded Age in our own world where the rich didn't really care about what happened to the poor, right? I mean, we don't have to think tainted in this case, but look at what happened to the Chinese immigrants in the United States when they were building the railroads, right? Think of kind of like the tainted in that way as filling that role where kind of like where if they die, that's a perk. They don't have to pay them instead. So now here's where I'm going to break things down a little bit differently than I have before so that we can be a little more succinct. So let's first talk about the bad. The first thing that could be considered bad is that Matar is building such a crazy big world where she gets into like the politics, she gets into, individual relationships. We deal with so many characters as well that sometimes that original plot line of the story, like Toshway trying to figure out what happened to that girl in the Brightwash, that can get lost at times. I think that, so I read probably like 150 pages. Then I had a day at work where I was running a loader instead of sitting in my tractor, and I wasn't able to read. And then through just various other things, I was busy that evening. So it was a day in between of reading. Well, when I got to the next part or that next day of reading, I kind of forgot what was going on just a little bit because we were dealing with like the politics of the Dominion at that time. And it's crazy, super interesting. But I think that at times it was easy to lose track of like what the real main issue in the plot line was. That's not necessarily like a terrible thing, right? But I felt at times that the main plot became secondary for the world building. And, that's just one of the things that maybe you could consider as bad. And then the second thing is that this does have epic fantasy level point of view characters. Usually when you're dealing with an urban fantasy, you're going to have 1, maybe 2 point of view characters. In fact, the last 2 that I got done, that I just read, and I both gave 5 stars to both of those, were single point of view character stories within urban fantasies. And sometimes it's easier to keep track of what's going on when you have that one character. Plus, I got so into especially Toshway and Stella that it is that like it would be jarring when you would get out of their character, right? Because I was so into the world. Like, I wasn't, I mean, I got into that movie in my mind and I was watching it. I think this would make a great TV show. And I was just so into it though that it would be actually jarring to me to go to one of the minor point of view characters because it sucked me out of that like feeling that I was in at times. And so, I mean, that's another thing. Like, she was doing such a great job of like creating a good character that like it threw me off when I would have to go to a minor point of view character. Both of these things, getting the number of point of view characters and the number of like threads, obviously those are fairly minor issues for the most part, but they are, I guess, when you're dealing with a book that's almost 700 pages long, you're going to get a lot of stuff within that. Now, the good. There's a lot of good in this one. Let's start off with the story, the writing itself. Man, I got into that movie in my mind immediately. And I mean, I could literally forget. By the time when I started reading for that second day, I probably read 300 pages. I had like 10 hours of composting to do. And I read for the entire time that I was able while I was doing my composting. It is one of those things where like you just get in the zone because the writing is so good. And so like just the way it was written, like I literally was like I was watching it unfold. And like I said, I thought of like Toshway as looking like Clint Eastwood and Stella as Nicole Kidman. And so like I could see those characters. And it's funny because like he's kind of described as like he's in his 40s and he's lived a pretty hard life. So I really did think of him as like in the spaghetti westerns, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or something like that, So I just I got so vividly into the story that I just hated ever putting it down. And that is why, it was jarring when I would get into other characters because I would just be so into those two characters, especially that that it threw me when I'd have to change. As a world building nerd, man, this one, I know that we're just dealing with one city, but we see this city so well. Like the way it's split up on the map. Like I only had to look at it once, and then the way that she's going to describe it is really going to break it down. You have the heights, where the rich live on the other side of the river. Then you have the slums where everyone normally, or all the normal people live and all the poor live. And the city just felt so vibrant. She describes lots of food, like people eat a lot. She is a whiskey and beer drinker in real life, the author. So she does just a great job of describing the different beers that they drink. I thought that was probably one of my favorite things, like, like the kind of beers they would drink with breakfast, the kind of beers they would drink with dinner. And I know it sounds kind of weird maybe in our own lives, but one like little history fact, I have a history degree, is that one of the big things throughout history, like even in the US, right? Our water supply is very shoddy if without proper filtration systems. There's a lot of like real bad stuff that can make you sick and die in our water in the United States. And so like even kids, there were actually rules on the book in like colonial era times of like how much gin a student was allowed to drink during class so they weren't too drunk, or what parts that you should mix alcohol and water for kids to drink so that they weren't too drunk as they were growing up, but that they weren't getting sick from drinking their water and the alcohol was killing it. So this time period, I'm sure there wasn't water filtration systems in the city of Yelsmer. So it's fun just to kind of like see like what they were drinking or what he was drinking at various times, right? So as a beer drinker, as a big craft beer fan, it was a particular joy to read during this story. And then, like I said before, I'm not gonna to go too super into detail here, but the magic system itself was just so cool. I guess it's more of a softer magic system than a hard like rules. We're never gonna go to like a magic school or anything like that. And as far as I can tell, unless you're like a high level magic user, there is no sort of like real training that is necessary. Like you're just gonna either have the ability to use the magic or not. In other areas of the Dominion where like there's lots of tribal places that are still kind of like basically giant reservations, just kind of like how they were in, in America during that during the Gilded Age, the late 1800s, where they're kind of allowed to do their own thing as long as they're not within the Dominion proper. And it sounds like more of that kind of stuff happens there. And I'm kind of hoping that we get to see more of that in the second book. Um, and so Magic System is also cool. Obviously, way more good than bad within the story, and even the bad for me isn't necessarily all that big of a bad. It's just that you gotta talk about the things that could be problematic just as well as you're going to talk about the things that are great about the book. So the last little bit is my own personal thoughts on the book. Man, this one just hits you in the feels. Um, if you're just looking for a book that is like a fun urban adventure, this is not a book for you. This book really talks about like the ills of the Gilded Age, right? Where the average person is gonna be poor. They're not gonna have access to healthcare. Stella, when she starts off the story, she's registered, like I said, as a minor tainted. Not she's hiding her full true ability, but she is working at a place for the poor, where if you're too poor to be able to afford to actually be healed, because healing is, like I said, it's not, healing isn't perfect, but if you have money to pay for healing, then you're going to get healed. But if you're poor and you can't afford to be healed, then what they'll do is they've got people who aren't supposed to be powerful enough to heal, but like that's kind of where their talent is. They'll take your pain away from you while you die. So, it's like, well, if you're rich, you're going to live a good, healthy life. And if you're poor, you're not. So we're really going to feel that like stratification just within the way the whole, even the official parts of the Dominion are set up. You're going to feel that inequality. And as the book unfolds, things get worse and worse. And you're going to see a lot of really bad things happen. You're going to see bad things happen to children. I don't remember there being a rape in the story, but that might be about the only like bad thing that can happen to someone that you don't see. There's going to be lots of murder. There's going to be torture. There's just going to be official state sanctioned bad things they're going to do to people that aren't even considered bad by most of the people in authority. Right? They're going to be the things that move the economy forward and that move that make the Dominion as powerful as it is. I think about the only thing that we don't see the tainted or talented do is actually serve in the army. In that case, we're dealing with your traditional late 1800s technology of like cannons and guns and things like that. They probably don't want the talented or the tainted to be used in war, so that other countries aren't either. It seems like the whole world that is mentioned doesn't use them for war in that case. But this is a heavy hitter of a book. It is the closest thing I've ever read to the Broken Empire trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Ever since the beginning of the podcast, that's been what my wife and I, when we used to do them together, that was like our benchmark book of when this book hits you in the feels, where does it rate in comparison to Broken Empire? Or not Broken Empire, that would be Mark Lawrence, which is a very fun grimdark. But where does it hit you in the Broken Earth level, right? Like, are you going to cry? Or is it just, a little bit grim? And you know what? This was one of those,